told me he was able to play on one of the TV side screens we have in the hall the other day, and he was really excited that he won. So I think he's looking to repeat that win here now that he's on, the big stage.
Yeah, Kareem's had a really good year as well. I mean, while 6 of the regionals have gone over to Quentin, he's managed to pick up 2 of the remaining ones. So making sure he's also a multiple regional champion in this year, playing very well in those tournaments, of course. And the European International Championships, he was in the top 8. So kind of 1 step behind Quentin in that one. Still 2 trainers who are very, very closely matched. And I think that's going to make for a fantastic finals.
And what's really interesting is that these trainers have not played each other here yet. They were not matched up in Swiss, and obviously they weren't matched up in Top Cut. So I'm sure they have a little bit of information about the others' teams going into things. Kareem's team in particular, I think, is really interesting with that Xerneas, the Lunala, Smeargle, Lucario, which is, I don't think, a Pokemon we've seen on stream at all this weekend yet, Tapu Lele and Incineroar. It's going to be a really interesting match because only Quentin has one of those primal Pokemon that brings with it the weather. He technically has 2 if the Rayquaza chooses to Mega Evolve in his game. So Kareem is going to be forced, I think, to accept whatever weather that Quentin puts on the field and really rely on that Xerneas on his side to deal that big damage and hopefully, keep the Kyogre and Rayquaza at bay.
I'll be curious to see if we see the Lucario. I think many people, looking at the typing of Lucario, may try and use it.
Right?
Yeah, and the big use for it there is trying to hit the Xerneas. Obviously, you have to be careful because of the typing. The fighting doesn't help, but because you're Steel type, you're in a good position. I wonder if this is going to be the selection. Of course, a fighting type moves could be rather useful against something like the Incineroar, something like the Ferrothorn. And I'll be curious to see if one of those very niche picks, one of those exciting and interesting picks that we love to see up here, is going to make an impact in this finals.
Well, it's interesting looking at Kareem's team as well. Quentin does have the option for something like a Tailwind from that Crobat on his side of the field. Kareem's Lunala is probably the Pokemon that will go for speed control on his side of the field. And just looking how that Lunala matches up against Quentin's team, it's going to be taking a lot of damage. It doesn't have much utility, I think, in terms of being able to deal big damage with its own attacks. And it's only going to take something like that Incineroar from Quentin's side of the field to sort of keep Lunala at bay. So, looking at Kareem's team, looking at how it's built, I like how he has that Smeargle, that Incineroar, that Tapu Lele to sort of try and buy that Xerneas time to go for something like that Geomancy we've seen all throughout the weekend and the format and the year. But I think he's going to have a difficult time trying to protect it. And I'm really curious to see if he's going to be playing it a little bit slower, maybe not going for that Geomancy right away, like we've seen other trainers do, in hopes that when Xerneas does hit the field with the Geomancy, all of Quentin's counters have been removed.
Yeah, well, the one thing I'd be curious to see from Quentin's side is how the Crobat is going to be executed as well. The Crobat can put in a whole lot of work against a number of Pokemon on Kareem's team, and there it is, right in the lead, alongside the Tapu Koko, while Kareem opts to lead with Tapu Lele and Lunala. We have, of course, had the terrains exchanged by both of the Tapu Koko and Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele's activating first and then being replaced, the Electric Surge bringing out Electric Terrain, completely giving up information on the item being held by Kareem's Tapu Lele. In this instance, the Choice Scarf will apply a lot of offensive pressure, but it's not going to be applying that pressure in its terrain of choice. Of course, we do have both of the Tailwind setters on the field here, and then we're going to see exactly how they shape up. Kareem's just going for it, though, with no terrain in play, straight after the Crobat, bringing it down to the Focus Sash. Tapu Koko, the next one to fire back, heading towards Lunala with a Volt Switch. Not much damage there, but giving Quentin some time to reposition.
And that's exactly what he needs. Fortunately for him, that Crobat was holding a Focus Sash, so it was not knocked out in one hit by that Tapu Lele. Knowing that he's brought the Ferrothorn with him and can threaten that Tapu Lele with something like a Gyro Ball, I think is going to be really important as these trainers just go to match Tailwinds.
Yeah, I think that's a safe move for both of these trainers. You don't want to let your opponent get Tailwind up completely unopposed and then be caught the next turn as you're desperately trying to set yours up and just get caught by these big hits. The Tapu Lele still applying a lot of pressure to this Crobat, pretty much giving it no option to make any more moves, not trying to weave in anything fancy like a Taunt. Really going to limit his options there. So this Ferrothorn's probably going to be in a position this turn where it needs to do as much as possible. Against the Tapu Lele, it could do an absolute absolute number on it, but we'll see if he's going to let that happen. Kareem, not a fan of that idea in the slightest.
And I like the fact that he's brought that Lucario with him, because that Ferrothorn, I think, is so threatening to his team, you know, knowing that it is going to centralize around the Xerneas. Yes, it takes about half of its health in on the switch from that Super Fang, but overall, I think a great adjustment and should be able to pick up the knockout on that Ferrothorn pretty easily the next turn.
Yeah, that Lucario coming in, though, taking the Super Van, probably got more than it bargained for. There wasn't the safest switch available for it. And that means as soon as it comes in, the Gyro Ball from this Ferrothorn immediately picking up the knockout. And even though they've traded 1-for-1, I think the Pokemon that Quentin has got knocked out is not as valuable to his offensive pressure as the one on Kareem's side of the field. Assuming
that the Xerneas is that last Pokemon on Kareem's side of the field, it's going to be up to this Lunala and Tapu Lele to figure out how to remove this Ferrothorn from the field. You know, looking at their typing, looking at their potential moves, I mean, Lunala could go for something like a super powerful Z move like we've seen many Lunala do, but we don't know what item it's holding yet. We don't even know if that's possible. Tapu Lele does get access to some interesting type coverage moves, but you know, most of them really are just running, you know, Psychic Moonblast and then a couple other attacks. So if Kareem has something that can hit that Ferrothorn super effectively, I think he has to reveal it now. Otherwise, he's forced to double into that slot, leaving Tapu Koko free to target down whichever Pokemon it wants and just giving Quentin some great momentum moving forwards into the latter part of this game.
I think the next turns are going to be so important in how do you deal with Ferrothorn. It's on the field there, it's just threatening with Gyro Ball. This Tapu Lele is not going to appreciate it. It's anywhere near safe from that. It's going to start just trying to wear it down now. The Moonblast not doing too much. Gets a special attack drop, not really what you're looking for. Tapu Koko given the opportunity in its terrain of choice once again. Lunala caught with the paralysis from that Thunderbolt, but the Z move coming through. That's going to make sure that we're getting a hit, and Kareem needs a lot of value out of this one.
Menacing Moonraze Maelstrom, Lunala's signature move, Z move of choice. Certainly one of the most powerful Z moves, I think, in the format right now. If anything can take down this Ferrothorn from Kareem's side of the field, you think it has to be the Z move, but Ferrothorn, such a bulky Pokemon, only took a little bit of chip damage from that Moonblast. You know, I think it's a very tall ask for this to knock out, and we'll see how this plays out.
That chip damage could be so important. Of course, Tapu Lele having to lock into a move because of its Choice Scarf. We'll see if it was enough for it to get there. It's not close. Still a good little chunk left on this Ferrothorn. And there's the Gyro Ball in retaliation. Tapu Lele immediately felled, and Quentin now in a clear Pokemon advantage with 3 remaining to Kareem's 2.
In Kareem's favor, you know, if that Tapu Lele were to go for a Psychic type attack while the Psychic Terrain was still up, that might have been the little extra bit of chip damage it needs to knock out the Ferrothorn for a Game 2 or Game 3. It is within KO range for something from that Xerneas, maybe a Moonblast if it can connect, but that Tapu Koko still at full health, still able to attack, and because the Lunala is paralyzed, you know, it's not going to be able to move prior to that Ferrothorn anymore. It's such a tough position. You know, Kareem really wants to protect that Xerneas, but I think he's already taken too much damage.
Well, Quentin's decided that now is the time to pull out the Z move of his own. See if he can get a little more value out of his, maybe trying to pick up a knockout that way, as Tapu Koko revealing the Fairyum Z, something that's been very popular here at the North American International Championships. Twinkle Tackle, the Z move of choice, and the Lunala is going to be caught by that one. Tapu Koko just trying to do a little bit more than those Thunderbolts, definitely getting more as he does knock the Lunala out. Kareem left with just the Xerneas on the field, and that is now left dazzling, gleaming. Not enough for a knockout on either of them, even with the critical hit. And Ferrothorn just retaliating as it does with the Gyro Ball for its 3rd knockout of the game.
I can see why Kareem went for the Dazzling Gleam over that single target Moonblast. I think he wanted to try and knock out that Ferrothorn while getting enough chip damage onto that Tapu Koko so that the Moonblast or whatever follow-up attack the next turn would have a likelihood of knocking out. Unfortunately for him, just fell short of dealing the damage he needed to knock out that Ferrothorn, and he didn't even get to see what Quentin's last Pokemon was, which I think is very interesting. You know, that Ferrothorn, just such a huge threat. You know, I think he has to play a lot safer. Maybe bring the Lucario and the Incineroar, or just bring the Incineroar over the Lucario on his side of the field so that he has an answer to that Ferrothorn that won't get knocked out by something like that Gyro Ball on the switch-in.
I think as well, you mentioned it's an interesting point that he didn't see the last Pokemon from Quentin. Considering the 3 Pokemon he did see, none of them were the restricted Pokemon. So knowing if he's decided to go Rayquaza or Kyogre in the back could help out. You know, if he gets a little bit further down the line in this game, a little bit closer to the mark, knowing what's in the back may help him with some of that decision making. Obviously, if it's something like Rayquaza, you maybe want to be a little more conservative with the Tapu Lele. And I think he did the right thing in that game, removing it as soon as he saw that Ferrothorn. Certainly interesting. But that Lucario just punished on the way in, immediately knocked out. And such a key part of beating this Ferrothorn was removed from play on the way in. That's something he's going to have to be a lot more careful of if he wants to level up this set.
Yeah, unfortunately for Lucario, you know, it's a very powerful Pokemon in terms of its physical attack stat. It's also known to be fairly fast, but is not on the bulky side. So it's not the Pokemon that you want to be switching in on situations like that. You really want it out on the field in a way that leaves it, you know, unattacked, unharmed. And in Kareem's case, I don't think Quentin gave him that opportunity. You know, a lot of trainers, when they do want to switch out a Pokemon to guarantee sort of a safe entry to the field, will maybe go for like a slow U-turn, or otherwise use something coverage like Fake Out to, you know, make sure that whatever would be targeting that slot cannot target that slot. And Kareem just doesn't have those options on his team, at least from what we've seen. You know, we know that Incineroar usually carries Fake Out, Smeargle usually carries Fake Out, but those are adjustments that Kareem will have to reveal going into this game too.
We'll see exactly what he goes for. I think Smeargle would be interesting, but I don't know about it with the Crobat as so easily revealed. Looks like we're going to be getting the same leads in this game. Crobat and Tapu Koko for Quentin, Tapu Lele and the Lunala for Kareem. Exactly the same interaction here. Psychic Terrain replaced by Electric Terrain through those Surge abilities. And you've got to wonder, is there any adaptation that Kareem can make from this lead? He knows that he's not going to be able to knock out the Crobat because of the Focus Sash, but maybe finding some damage on the Tapu Koko a little bit earlier would be more interesting for him. He certainly has to weigh it up, but there's no real way he can stop the Tailwind from Quentin's side.
Yeah, Kareem knows that the Crobat is going to be a guaranteed 2-hit knockout because we did see the reveal of the Focus Sash earlier, and I liked what you just said about maybe targeting down that Tapu Koko a bit earlier. Crobat only had Super Fang in terms of an attack from what we've seen, and that always does half your damage. And or you could just taunt it and stop the Tailwind. That works too.
Yeah, Kareem revealing his little secret there is going to be the taunt on the Choice Scarf carrying Tapu Lele. So maybe forced to switch out the next turn, but Crobat as well in a similar position. The Moongeist Beam, good amount of damage to Crobat, doesn't bring it down to its Focus Sash, but that turn's worked really well for Kareem, especially with Tapu Koko on Quentin's side protecting.
Unfortunately, though, he has to switch out his Tapu Lele because he's now Choice Scarfed into Taunt. I mean, I guess you could taunt the Tapu Koko and stop it from protecting any further, but, you know, I think that you'd be better off preserving that Tapu Lele forever, for later, bringing back the terrain, and then, you know, being able to use that super powerful Psychic to deal big damage later on.
One thing that is interesting, though, with Crobat taunted and it being forced to Super Fang, would be curious to see exactly if he switched it out. Is there another way around it? Tapu Lele's staying in and trying his luck here. I'll be curious to see, you know, Crobat maybe just trying to catch whatever was going to switch for that Tapu Lele. But in this case, it doesn't leave the field, and it's just there. The only downside to that play is exactly what we're seeing now. Kareem is the one getting up the Tailwind, and that's going to make things a whole lot easier for him if things do have to switch.
I think, again, I think Tapu Lele really has to switch. I like how he waited that turn, maybe to guarantee the Tailwind so that the Lunala would be faster than the Crobat and could knock it out before it connects something like that Super Fang with whatever comes in for the Tapu Lele. So now that that's been done, you know, switch out the Tapu Lele, maybe send in the Lucario if that's what you have in the back, or whatever Pokemon can deal some big damage to this Tapu Koko. You also have the option of using that Z move as well in a future turn if that's how you want to take it down.
This looks like Lucario's second attempt at switching in for the Tapu Lele. Could be a whole lot safer, and with Crobat knowing that it may just get caught by the Lunala on the the other side of the field. Decides to keep it safe. Kareem, though, has determined that he wants a little more damage than the original Moongeist beam. And for him, it's going to be the menacing Moonraze Maelstrom, trying to get a whole lot more damage down a little bit earlier in the game this time.
You have to imagine this is going to connect with that Tapu Koko, given how Moongeist Beam did over 50% of damage to Crobat's health. And, you know, this might threaten a knockout even. It's such a powerful Z move. Lunala is, I think, one of the most powerful Pokemon in terms of offensive power in the Ultra metagame. And, you know, it literally brings the power of space and the moon and everything and just crashes it into that Tapu Koko. It's a knockout.
Tapu Koko not able to take those hits. Not built as the most sturdy Pokemon around. And Kareem's put himself in such a fantastic position now. Not only has he got an unopposed Tailwind up, Quentin, of course, does have the option to try and set one up, but it's not going to be quite this turn. He has got his Lucario in the face of this Ferrothorn, and it didn't get caught and completely knocked out on the way in. So a lot better of positioning for Kareem here. And he does have the Pokemon advantage as well. We do finally see what Quentin's fourth Pokemon is going to be in this team selection. Rayquaza, his choice of restricted Pokemon.
Rayquaza brings with it that Dragon Ascent. It's a flying type move. Lucario will not appreciate that whatsoever. To Kareem's benefit, you know, the Tapu Lele is safe in the back of its party. We saw, you know, it go for some really powerful attacks in the previous turn. And, you know, after a Dragon Ascent, Rayquaza's defenses are going to be weakened by one stage, which means, you know, anything Tapu Lele throws at it will most likely be able to knock it out, and it won't even be able to extreme speed because of the psychic terrain. So Kareem's in a good position once that Tapu Lele comes out on the field against this Rayquaza. I think his challenge for this turn is to be able to remove the Ferrothorn from the field before that's forced to happen.
Well, we'll see if Lucario is afforded the opportunity to do that. It's first going to have to take this extreme speed from Rayquaza. Takes that very, very well because of its steel typing. And Lucario just decides to Meteor Mash, probably believing Ferrothorn was going to protect. Does connect and land on that Rayquaza. Follow-up attack, the Moongeist Beam from the Lunala. Definitely putting the pressure down as Rayquaza removed as quickly as it arrived. Extreme speed no longer an option, nor a big hit. Ferrothorn will be allowed to Gyro Ball, this time heading towards the Mega Lucario, and it's just not enough for a knockout without that previous Super Fang damage.
Yeah, it looks like Lucario was just short of, or just ahead of the health that it needed to be to remain on the field. So extreme speed just not quite covering it from that Rayquaza. Quentin's down to his last two Pokemon, and I mean, to Crobat's benefit, it should have an opportunity here to go for something like that Tailwind before it gets knocked out, but it's not going to do much. You know, Ferrothorn is not a speed Pokemon, to say something usually said about another Pokemon. At this point, the best thing that this Crobat can do, I think, is try and hang around on the field long enough to make a difference in the health of Kareem's Pokemon with that Super Fang.
It's really difficult, though, because right now, Super Fang may help you slowly work down Lucario. There's not even going to be any protection from Quentin this turn. The Ferrothorn's just going to receive the close combat. The Iron Barbs
I mean, that's chip damage. That's important to know, I think, for, you know, future turns.
Not enough. Lucario is still standing. And Crobat now completely unable to do anything in this game. It's not even going to be afforded the opportunity to try and fight back as Kareem wraps this game up 4-0 in the Pokemon count. This time, Kareem being a little more conservative and not revealing his last one, as the series is tied up 1-1, and we'll be moving on to Game 3 here in the senior finals.
Just a great adjustment made by Kareem. I really liked how he played that game. You know, I think he was very careful about that Tapu Lele, and that's exactly what we were saying. You know, he found an opening for the Lucario to enter the field. It was able to attack and get the knockouts it needed, and it was able to knock out that Ferrothorn before it caused too much trouble, and I think that's why he was able to take such a decisive victory. I don't think Quentin's going to give him that opportunity, though, going into Game 3, because, again, the major difference between Games 1 and 2 was that Lucario. So if Quentin's able to either, you know, predict and catch that Lucario in on the switch like he did in Game 1, or otherwise, you know, be able to take it down before it can really threaten his team going into you know, the rest of this game, I think he's going to be in a great spot to sort of win that third game. But what a close match between both these trainers.
Quentin's Crobat is really being put in a tough position here, because in Game 1, it did fantastically. It landed the Super Fang, which caused Lucario to be easily knocked out by Gyro Ball. Of course, it match the Tailwind from Kareem's Lunala, and that's important. But in Game 2, Kareem has shown he has a very clear and concise answer to it. He played around it very, very well with the taunt. He then didn't let it Super Fang something on the way in, biding his time, setting up the Tailwind of his own. So if I'm Quentin here, I'd be in a position where you need and want to bring that Crobat to make sure you can set up a Tailwind. But you can't afford to bring it if it's just going to get shut down that easily.
I know.
Both trainers taking their time on this one. One game to decide who will be your international champion in the seniors division today.
Maybe if Quentin can find a way to deal some big damage and otherwise stop that Lunala from using Tailwind, or just, wait that Tailwind out as we've seen some other trainers do when sort of playing the speed control game, he'd be able to maneuver without that Crobat. But for now, it's going to stick with that same lead we've seen, the Crobat and the Tapu Koko. It looks like no adjustments from either of these trainers as we start this game.
Well, we say that, but there could be adjustments in how they play. I think that's very important to note, is once you've shown something like the taunt on Tapu Lele, then you're relying on Quentin to make a play, and then you need to capitalize off that. But in the same vein, it's all about seeing what your opponent's going to do and seeing if you can really read 1 or 2 turns ahead, make that prediction, see if they're going to go for it, and if you can weave in something unexpected, you can very quickly turn the tides of battle and make an advantage here. Tapu Koko really sort of in an interesting position. It comes in mainly to keep the terrain in Quentin's favor, but then it struggles to deal huge damage. And that's something that he's going to have to think about. Looks like we're going back to Game 2 on this one, as taunt lands on Quentin's Crobat. He does try and Tailwind, doesn't get it, and Volt Switch coming through. A little bit of damage on Lunala, but again, similar to Game 1, it allows him to reposition the board a little bit.
It does, and I think this is the perfect opportunity for that Ferrothorn to make an appearance, because as we've seen in past games, it's not threatened by the Tapu Lele, it's not really threatened by this Lunala, and it can really take the Tapu Lele out before it's able to do too much damage. So this is almost forcing Kareem to remove it from the field and put that Lucario or maybe even that Xerneas, depending on what his last Pokemon is, in jeopardy.
Well, the Ferrothorn does come back in for the Tapu Koko. That's that's the position that he put himself in Game 1, which I think was very nice for him, being able to deal with that Tapu Lele, especially now, similarly to Game number 2, he's stuck in there taunting.
Yep.
If he can make that call once again, try and land Super Fang and something, follow up like Gyro Ball, then catching that Lucario on the way in would very quickly change things, even though he doesn't have Tailwind in play. Of course, Crobat switching out would be something that Kareem could capitalize on. A big menacing Moonrange Railstrom onto whatever comes into that slot would be a real issue. It looks like Kareem, though, is executing the exact same strategy as he is in Game number 2, waiting a turn before you taunt something, trying to catch whatever's coming in Crobat's place, but not getting there.
And I think that's okay. I mean, the Lucario was so key to his strategy in Game 2, playing it safe. Yes, he does lose the Tapu Lele here, but Lucario can come in for free. It's going to be faster, and Lunala can take care of that Crobat and remove the Super Fang from the field before the combination of the Super Fang and the Gyro Ball will knock it out.
Yeah, getting the knockout big there for Quentin does help out, does make sure that he's keeping up in the Pokemon count. But as you say, the Tailwind is up, and realistically, Kareem can knock both of these Pokemon out. If Quentin is to start switching around, that could be fine, but then Kareem's still in a position with a little bit more of the Tailwind to use to try and find that advantage and keep going. So even if one attack lands and it's not very effective, he's then afforded the chance to change it up for the next turn, still moving first. Of course, Ferrothorn not in the best position facing down this Lucario, but you've got to be so careful when you switch into an offensive powerhouse like that.
And you almost have to wonder if this Ferrothorn is going to protect this turn so that it doesn't take damage from the Lucario. Yes, Crobat is probably going to be knocked out, but then you can at least send in that Tapu Koko relatively unthreatened, maybe wait out the end of this Tailwind. I think it's very interesting that the Tapu Koko switched in here. Yes, it's a very, safe play. I don't think it's going to be taking a lot of damage from a fighting type move thanks to its fairy typing, but protect from that Ferrothorn would have accomplished the same thing. So might be an interesting thing to note as we watch the rest of this game play out.
Yeah, Lucario absolutely going for it there. Landing a close combat on Tapu Koko. Not very effective, but it really, really hurt. Lucario's fences are dropped, of course, as a side effect of close combat. But that's really going to be it for the turn. We do see the Lunala heading on up for a Moongeist Beam. I think that switch, not the safest at all. Kareem calling it so well there. He knows that this Crobat's going to be so limited in its options. And Kareem taking that Tapu Koko out on the switch in, just covering those bases, saying, okay, I'll try and close combat the Ferrothorn. If you do switch it out, I'll make sure that whatever comes in gets caught short in those regards. Maybe forcing now Quentin to reveal his 4th Pokemon once again. And then we're going to be in an interesting position. Of course, Quentin Crobat does now have the ability to start tailwinding again, and things could get real nasty in that regard.
The Rayquaza as well could go for an extreme speed on that Lucario, maybe try and deal some damage that way. It is a really interesting spot. Like you said, that Crobat's taunt has worn out, and it can start being more supportive, and it can do what it wants to do again. Kareem can't leave it on the field as a result. If it were to get a Tailwind up this late on in the game, it's most likely that Tailwind would persist until the end of the game, and then this Rayquaza will be able to deal so much more damage because it won't have to worry about, taking attacks from this Lunala or this Lucario first. Quentin just lost his Pokemon that knew the Z move, and he didn't get to use it. Kareem still has his Z move available. Maybe this is one of those turns where you just go for the Z move, go for the KO on the Crobat, and then, once everything's said and done, you have an opportunity to sort of adjust and take things from there.
Well, Kareem getting that Xerneas in, finally revealing that's going to be his last Pokemon there, the Lucario, trying to save itself for later. The Mega Evolution coming through on Rayquaza. No real surprises there. There's no Weather War to winning. You don't need to hold the potential Delta Stream, so you may as well just Mega Evolve it and get going in those regards. Obviously, Delta Stream is in play, but I don't think it's going to be too relevant over the course of this game. Rayquaza will Extreme Speed, heading towards that Xerneas. Not a real problem here, as Menacing Moonmaze Railstrom finally used by Kareem in this game, looking for a knockout to carve out that Pokemon advantage numerically once again.
And keeping that Mega Lucario safe so that when the Ferrothorn is forced back out onto the field, it can easily use that close combat to get a knockout.
Yeah, well, getting it out of the field there, very smart. Xerneas took a good amount of damage on the way in from Extreme Speed for its troubles, but I don't think that's going to be too terrifying here. Rayquaza taken through the wormhole and probably going to be taking a lot of damage as well. Lunala's well known for being able to just take things and knock them out very quickly. Of course, Kareem really needs this Rayquaza to be removed from play. He absolutely gets it. No concern there. Kareem looking very comfortable. The strong winds have dissipated, but there's a tailwind to replace them. So still windy from Quentin's side of the field, but certainly in a very different position. The tailwind over on Kareem's side has expired, but Lunala's still in a very good position to just set one up if he decides that's the way to play the game.
And Crobat can't even attack that Lunala before it will have a chance to move because Super Fang is a normal type move.
Yeah, you can't hit Lunala with the Super Fang. So you can just protect the Xerneas or, maybe buy a little bit of time that way. Of course, Crobat will have the option to try and shut down that Xerneas, but there comes a point where Kareem really doesn't need the Xerneas. He could just try and take the Crobat out with something simple. Just really go for it. And all he needs to do is make sure that Lucario comes in safely to close combat Ferrothorn.
I think he still needs the Xerneas, but I don't think he needs the Geomancy. And I think that's a distinction that I want to make. He needs to be able to deal some damage to that Crobat this turn. Whether or not that's through the Lunala or the Xerneas or both, I think is his call.
Well, he tried to call the Lucario switch in there. Not going to get it as Lunala taking nothing from that Super Fang. A little Dazzling Gleam there, not too much either way. Lunala just Moongeist beaming. I think we know what Kareem's strategy is. He just wants to start knocking things out. The Dazzling Gleam damage, not too important there, but at least it's something, a little bit of chip damage. It's certainly one way to deal with Ferrothorn. It's going to reveal the knockoff, and Lunala not felled by that at all. Still, Ferrothorn 1v3, doing very small amounts of damage.
Just holding on long enough to get one more Moongeist Beam to target in this Ferrothorn, maybe two if Quentin decides to go for the knockout on the Xerneas this turn. But, this Ferrothorn's in a really tough spot. Maybe if it were, if it knew Leech Seed and had leftovers and could play like that slow game that we've seen a lot of Ferrothorn do in past formats, Quentin might have a chance. But, this Ferrothorn, knowing knockoff, I think is something very unique. We didn't see the leftovers activate either, so I don't think this Ferrothorn really has what it takes to play the long game. And yes, it's going to be able to score a knockout again this turn. Really, its pick of a knockout. But it is going to be taking damage from both these Pokemon, and it's just going to be clearing the way for that Lucario to come through. Yeah,
a little bit of damage coming through from the Moonblast of Xerneas there. Not enough to really be threatening a knockout. Moongeist Beam following up, still not enough there at all. really trying to get a little bit down at a time. And the bulldoze in retaliation, the last move revealed of this Ferrothorn's moveset, will pick the knockout up on Rayquaza. And of course, put something like that Xerneas a little bit lower on the speed tier. Do remember that Quentin has Tailwind in play. This Ferrothorn, not known for its speed, certainly in an interesting position, but it's really not going to appreciate facing down this Lucario. The past couple of turns, the Kareem has just been doing little bits of damage. Those little bits of damage certainly add up, but this Lucario is going to be able to do a whole lot more damage.
I mean, we saw in Game 2 how much that close combat did to that Ferrothorn, so really, as long as it's able to connect this turn, I think Kareem is going to be in a very, very good spot, and our next national champion.
Yeah, Kareem will be, with this close combat, your North American International Champion for the Seniors Division. Quentin putting up a fantastic fight, but after losing Game 1, Kareem bouncing back in Games 2 and